Story 1. The fence surrounding Blackwood Elementary was a skeleton of rust, its no trespassing sign peeling like sunburnt skin. Mark, ever the leader, found a gap wide enough for us to slip through. The air inside the school grounds instantly felt different, still and heavy, like the breath held in a dead man's lungs. "You sure about this?" Chloe whispered, her flashlight beam trembling on the cracked asphalt of the playground. A single lonely swing creaked in a breeze we couldn't feel. "It's just an old school," Mark scoffed, but his voice was a little too loud in the sepulchral quiet. He kicked a loose stone, the sound echoing unnaturally. "They shut it down in the 80s. Asbestos. Nothing scarier than that." I didn't say anything. I was the documentarian, the one with the camera, tasked with capturing the decay. My real job, I knew, was to be the quiet observer, the one who noticed things the others were too busy trying to ignore. We found our way in through a boarded-up window in the back, its plywood pried loose by other thrill-seekers. The air that hit us was a cloying mix of mildew, rot, and something else. Something faintly sweet and chemical, like old formaldehyde. My flashlight cut a path through the darkness of a long hallway. Lockers stood gap-mouthed and empty, their doors hanging off hinges like broken teeth. The first unsettling thing was the graffiti. It wasn't the usual spray-painted tags. These were scrawled in what looked like chalk, or maybe white paint, in a frantic, childish hand. Not words, but symbols. Spirals that coiled into themselves and then ended in a sharp, jagged line, like a scream. They were on the lockers, the walls, even the ceiling. "Creepy kid art," Mark muttered, kicking at a pile of desiccated leaves that had blown in. From the far end of the hall, a noise. A soft, rhythmic scrape. 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 "Rats," Mark said, a little too quickly. "Big ones." Chloe grabbed my arm. "I don't like this." "It doesn't sound like rats." She was right. It sounded heavier, like a child dragging a wooden block along the floor, endlessly, patiently. We stood frozen, listening as the sound continued its metronomic rhythm for a full minute before abruptly stopping. The silence that followed was somehow worse. We pushed on, our footsteps loud on the grimy linoleum. We chose a classroom at random. The door groaned open to reveal a kindergarten room frozen in time. Tiny wooden chairs were scattered around miniature tables. Faded construction paper animals peeled from the walls. A fine layer of dust coated everything, a gray shroud over a forgotten world. And in the center of the room, a single wooden rocking horse. Its paint was chipped, one of its button eyes missing, giving it a winking, malevolent look. As we swept our lights across the room, something caught my eye on the chalkboard. More of the spiral graffiti, but this time there were words underneath, written in the same jagged script. "It doesn't want to share." A visceral coldness, entirely separate from the evening chill, sank into my bones. "Okay," I said, my voice tight. "I've got enough pictures. Let's go." Mark laughed, a nervous, brittle sound. "You're not scared of a little rocking horse, are you?" He stepped forward and gave it a shove with his foot. It began to rock back and forth with a dry, wooden shriek. Creak thump, creak thump. We watched it, the motion hypnotic in the weaving cones of our flashlights. It slowed, the arc of its rocking becoming smaller and smaller, until it finally came to a rest. We all let out a breath we didn't realize we'd been holding. And then, in the dead, suffocating silence, it began to rock again. On its own. Slowly at first, then faster, more violent, its wooden runners thudding against the floorboards with a frantic energy. Thump, 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 thump. It wasn't rocking. It was thrashing, like an animal caught in a trap. Chloe screamed, a raw, strangled sound. That's when we heard the other noise. It wasn't the scraping from before. This was a high, thin, metallic sound, coming from the hallway. Ding! A single clear note, like a tiny silver bell. It was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. "Let's go!" Mark yelled, his bravado finally shattered. Now! We scrambled out of the classroom, our feet slipping on the dusty floor. The rocking horse's frantic thudding chased us, but it was the bell that filled me with a primal dread. We ran down the hall, the beams of our flashlights bouncing wildly off the spiral-covered walls. Ding! Closer this time. It was coming from the stairwell at the end of the hall, the one that led to the basement. I could hear something else now, too. A wet, shuffling sound. We didn't wait to see what it was. We sprinted for the window we'd come through, a singular thought in all our minds. Out. I practically threw Chloe through the opening before scrambling out after her. Mark was right behind me, his breath coming in ragged sobs. We didn't stop running until we reached the rusted fence and tumbled back out onto the street, collapsing onto the dew-wet grass, gasping for air. We were safe. We sat there for a long time, the only sounds our own ragged breathing and the distant hum of the city. Finally, I pushed myself up, my heart still hammering against my ribs. "Did you guys hear?" I started to ask, but stopped. From deep within the black, silent carcass of the school, I heard it one last time. Faint, but perfectly clear. Ding! And I had the sudden, sickening certainty that it wasn't a sound of warning. It was a sound of summons, a dinner bell, and it knew we had left without being excused. Story 2. The air in the car was thick with a nervous energy, the kind that's half excitement, half pure dread. Liam was driving, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, as he stared at the skeletal silhouette of Blackwood High against the sickly yellow moonlight. Chloe was in the back, her camera's red recording light a tiny demonic eye in the darkness. And I was in the passenger seat, already regretting this. "You sure about this, Liam?" I asked, my voice a little too thin. "It's the holy grail of urban exploration, man," he said, his grin a flash of white in the gloom. "They say it's been empty for 30 years, locked up tight." He killed the engine, and the sudden silence was deafening. The only sound was the wind whispering through the skeletal branches of the trees that crowded the school grounds. We got out, our breath pluming in the cold night air. A rusted chain-link fence, sagging and torn in one corner, was our only obstacle. We slipped through easily. The building loomed over us, a hulking beast of brick and broken glass. We found our entry point, a ground-floor window where the plywood had been pried away. One by one, we crawled through, our feet landing on a floor carpeted with shattered glass and decaying leaves. The air inside was heavy with the smell of damp plaster, mildew, and something else. Something faintly metallic and sweet, like old blood. "Okay, let's get some footage," Chloe whispered, panning her camera's light down the long, dark corridor. Lockers lined the walls, some hanging open like gaping mouths. Our flashlights cut trembling paths through the oppressive darkness. The first thing we saw was the graffiti. It wasn't the usual spray-painted tags. These were scratched deep into the plaster, thin and spidery. One near the principal's office read, "They still hear the bell." "Creepy," Chloe murmured, zooming in. We pushed deeper, our footsteps echoing unnaturally in the vast silence. We entered the main hall, and a chill that had nothing to do with the autumn air washed over me. It was colder here, a deep, penetrating cold that seemed to emanate from the very walls. That's when we heard the first noise, a soft, rhythmic thump, 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 coming from the gymnasium at the end of the hall. "Probably just an animal," Liam said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was the skeptic, the one who always had a rational explanation, but even he looked unsettled. We crept towards the gym, our hearts pounding in our chests. The graffiti here was different. Scrawled in what looked like dried mud, or something darker, were the words, "She cries in the gym." Liam pushed on the heavy double doors. They groaned open, revealing a cavernous darkness. Our lights swept across the warped wooden floor. In the center of the court, a single deflated basketball sat motionless. As we watched, bathed in the beams of our flashlights, it began to roll. It wasn't a quick movement. It was slow, deliberate, rolling a few feet across the floor before coming to a dead stop. None of us spoke. The air became thick, hard to breathe. The thumping had stopped. In its place was a new sound, a sound that made the hairs on my arms stand on end, a faint, mournful sob. It seemed to come from the bleachers, lost in the shadows. "Okay," Chloe stammered, her camera shaking. I think I've got enough. We should go." Liam didn't argue. He just nodded, his face pale. We turned to leave, and that's when it happened. From the far end of the hall we'd just come down, a sharp clang echoed through the school. It was the sound of a locker door slamming shut. Panic set in. We broke into a run, our flashlights bouncing wildly, creating a dizzying strobe of decaying hallways and ghostly classrooms. Whispers seemed to slither from the shadows, just at the edge of hearing, formless, sibilant sounds that scraped against my nerves. We were almost at the exit window when a door to a classroom we were passing swung open on its own, slowly and silently. My light caught a glimpse inside. All the desks and chairs were arranged in a perfect circle in the middle of the room, every single one facing the door, facing us. We didn't stop. We scrambled for the window, clawing our way out into the cold, clean night air. We sprinted through the overgrown grass, not daring to look back, tumbled through the gap in the fence, and piled into the car. Liam fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking violently. The engine roared to life, and we peeled out of there, tires screaming on the asphalt. None of us said a word for miles. The only sound was our ragged breathing. Finally, I chanced a look in the side view mirror. The school was a distant dark shape against the horizon, but for a fleeting heart-stopping moment, I could have sworn I saw a light flicker on in one of the highest windows, a single pale face watching us go.